Hello, and welcome to 5 Tips for Creating an Effective Pricing Policy. My name is Rich Barsamian. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Advanced Clutch Technology. I've spent the last 10 years researching, writing, implementing, and executing pricing policies. And today I'd like to share a little bit of what I've learned over the years to help you develop a great pricing policy. But let's talk about the race to the bottom. It's the race that none of us want to be in, right? I mean, here as a manufacturer, you've spent millions to bring your product to market in research and development, engineering, marketing, sales, customer service, tech support. I could go on and on. You know the cost to bring it to market, only to have it devalued, only to have it devalued in the eyes of consumers that you're the cheap brand. Well, we need to rethink how we're looking at this. And so today we're going to talk about creating an effective pricing policy and what that looks like. Before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the word definitions. One of them is MAP policy. It just seems like everybody uses MAP policy to describe every pricing policy there is, right? And I get it. Nobody says, do you have a cotton swab? They go, do you have a Q-tip? No one says, can you give me a facial tissue? They go, do you have any Kleenex? So I get it, but MAP policy, MAP stands for minimum advertised price. That's the advertised price that your product, the lowest price that your product can be sold for. There's also MRP, minimum resale price. Minimum resale price is more like the net price out the door, out the cart, everything. So think Sony, Apple, the price is the price is the price. That's what an MRP price is. And there's also a wholesale MRP, where sometimes a manufacturer will put together a wholesale MRP that it's the lowest wholesale price that a product can be sold for as well. So there's a couple different programs out there, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about that on the front side. And again, I get it. There's a lot of confusion sometimes when it comes to this, but hopefully that kind of helps. And this will give you a better perspective and just more as an educational piece on how to look at a pricing policy. So let's get started. The overview. So what we're going to cover today is identifying the problem. Do you even have a problem? Is there any issues? Believe it or not, I've known manufacturers that thought there was an issue. They went out, did their homework, came back and said, actually, we don't have a problem. It's okay. So you don't want your perception to be reality. You want to make sure and you want to identify what that looks like. Once we know that you have a problem, then we're going to talk about the stages of implementation and how we're going to do that. And there's some things that you're going to have to be very careful about, that you're going to want to really know about. And I'm going to kind of give you the inside scoop on that. Writing the best policy. Covering writing the best policy is really critical because you want to make sure that the policy you have fits your needs. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I can't say enough about writing a good policy and what that looks like. So we'll talk about that. The penalty phase. When you're writing a good policy, you want the penalty phase to be very strong, meaning what's going to happen to someone who breaks your policy? Is it going to be enough for them to want to follow your policy, or is it going to be so weak that no one's going to care? So you got to think about those kind of things. And then finally, we'll talk about what I call the 4 C's. And the 4 C's are ultimately these critical components that if you're able to get all of these elements in, your success rate will be pretty high for having an effective policy. So let's get started. First of all, we need to identify the problem. Charles Kettering, who started Delco and was actually the head of GM research from 1920 to 1947, had a saying, and I'm going to paraphrase it to this: a well-defined problem is half solved. You probably heard that before, right? But if you think about it, man, that's really true. So what we want to do is we want to find out if you really have a problem. If a reseller is selling your brand, more than likely they're going to sell the most popular items and discount those the most. So I'm going to want you to do a little exercise where you're going to shop a handful of your products your top selling products. And we're going to see if there's an issue. And we can do this very quickly. So take an Excel sheet, take 10 of your top part numbers, okay? And then in the next column over, you're going to write the retail MSRP. The next column, you'll write the price shopped, the street price. And then in the next column, you can have the margin or the percentage difference if you want, or you can save it to the end. And then I want you to go shop anywhere between 5 and 7 different resellers online for that same product so that you come up with an average selling price for each of those products. And ultimately, when you do that, you're going to identify the average percentage that your product is being discounted. So when this is all said and done, you're going to have a number. And maybe it's your product is being sold at 20% off of MSRP. Maybe it's 37% off of MSRP. I'm making this up. Whatever that looks like, that's the goal of this exercise. We just need to know how much your product is being discounted off of MSRP, okay? Now that you know that average percentage that your product is being discounted off of MSRP, you're ready to figure out your stages of implementation. So you need to determine what the lowest net price you want your product to ultimately sell for. So this is ultimate. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, you need to figure out what the base price really should be. Well, how do you do that? Well, you need to think about what the average gross margin is that a reseller of your product needs to make in order to offer the type of customer service, sales, and tech support that their customers are accustomed to receiving, right? So this is the be-all, end-all number. It may not be the number you go with originally because you may have to do this in stages, right? But you want to at least set what's the ultimate goal for the company? Where would we like to see our product at a street price level? So ultimately, you'll probably consider, after you figure out the average gross margin of what a reseller needs to make, once you know what that number is, it's just not an average, and you know your customer base, you know what they do, you know what the resellers do, you can figure that out. That'll be easy for you. But you figure out what that number is, and now you come up with a plan of how do I get there. And this could take 3 to 5 years. Who knows? But I would caution you, don't tell anybody what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. Just come up with a plan, and you may not have a set schedule as to when you can make these changes in your pricing. Why do I say that? I don't want you to end up with sticker shock out there. You create sticker shock when you just, let's say it's 30% off MSRP and you want it to be 20 and you just shoot your prices up 20%. Well, consumers are going to get sticker shock, and you don't want to create that. So you're going to have to figure out, how do I get to that number and how long will it take me to do that, right? And look, be patient. I hate to say it, but ultimately it's a cliche, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and your product, it didn't get devalued in a day either. It took time, right? So like anything, be patient, stay the course, but figure out how you can achieve that ultimate number you want to get to. And trust me, as you begin to implement it and your customers see the change, they'll know you're doing something and you're moving the right direction. Okay? Really important. So with that, I'm going to take you to writing the best policy. Look, you're going to need a policy, but please do not go find another company's policy, copy it, do a find and replace, and put your company's name, okay? There are no boilerplates. There's just not. You need to have a policy written that works with your company's infrastructure, okay? What works for Sony and Nintendo might not be what works for you or what you're looking for, They could, for example, be giving millions of dollars in advertising money that they say if you violate their policy, they'll take from the customer. They could do that as a penalty. We'll get more into penalties in a minute. But again, you want to seek out a policy that's going to work for your business, and only you know that. So I would say come up with the criteria of what you need. for your policy to work, just get some bullet points together. And if you don't have one, find a brand protection attorney. They are seasoned, and you can ask the questions about your company in order to create a policy that fits your specific needs. And if you are able to lay out what those things are, they may even come alongside you and say, oh, did you think of this and this? They'll come back and get you a policy that's going to fit your company's needs, and not just grabbing a policy off the internet and trying to just copy it. Okay. That's a big fat fail. You will fail if you do that. So don't do that. Okay. I don't want you to fail. I want you to be successful. If you do choose to write your own policy, hey, I've done it. I get it. That's fine. The only thing there is just be sure you pass it and get approval from legal counsel, from your legal side. Okay. You just want to make sure that everything's done lawfully and you've got it all correct in terms of your policy, and let them tune it up from there. Okay. But that would be the incredibly important thing to do if you're going to write your own policy, So just wanted to put that out there. All right. A really key element to having a great policy is having a penalty phase. And when you decide on a policy, it's critical that it contains a strong sting to the reseller found to be non-compliant with your policy. Okay, the sting has to hurt a little bit. However, be careful here, because whatever the penalty is to the reseller, you must imagine that your best number one customer will violate, because they're going to. It may not be on purpose, it may be by accident, but it's gonna happen. So you have to measure, what is that going to do to the business if they can't purchase from us from a certain amount of time, or we have to cut them off, or whatever that looks like based on the penalty of the policy, right? While the policy needs to have a sting to the violator, it can't be so strong that you cripple your own company. I've heard of companies that did 90 days on the do not sell list. Well, hello, 90 days is like a quarter of a year in sales. That could be devastating, right? However, maybe that company needed to do that. Maybe that was what worked for them. But the one thing is that you're not trying to be punitive. So, you're not trying to totally hurt them. You're just trying to come up with something that says, wow, if I violate this policy, this happens. And when this happens, it disrupts everything. And they're going to want to follow your policy. Now, you can't be the boy who cried wolf. We all know the old story of the boy that cried wolf. If you say this is your policy, you need to enforce it and stand behind it. You have to be 100% in, all in, or don't do this at all. That's the big thing. I can't stress it enough. I hear a lot of times that a distributor or a customer gets a bad reputation for, oh, they don't follow the policy, oh, they don't care. I go, what policy? Show me. Tell me what it is. Oh, well, yeah, hearsay. Look, here's the deal. In 10 years of doing this, if you have a real policy and you really execute it evenly to everybody like you're supposed to, and you don't look the other way because it's so-and-so, you enforce that policy, it's going to hurt sometimes, but guess what? They'll respect you and they'll know you mean business. And believe it or not, they want to make margin too. They want to be able to hire people and pay the bills and have a certain number of success stories along the way, and offer a certain level of support to their customer base. It's going to be really important. So when I hear that, if it's a company that doesn't really enforce the policy, here's what happens. And put yourself in their shoes. So the product's being sold at, whatever off of the price. If it's me and I know that manufacturer's not enforcing it, guess what? I'm going to follow suit too. I'm going to sell it for that price. So I could be considered guilty too, because are you going to miss a sale? Really? Of course not. But if you know that they're enforcing it, then you're going to live by their policy, because everybody's going to benefit. So I want to give you some idea of what this looks like. And so I'm going to review a couple of examples of effective penalties that I've seen used over the years. One of them is a 3 strikes policy. So a 3 strikes policy is really good because as you're launching this policy, trust me, people are gonna blow it. And you can never discuss the policy with anybody. It's not a discussion. It can never be construed as an agreement between 2 parties. Okay. We're not going to be oh, if so and so does this, we'll do. No, 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 no. There's none of that. Okay. So let's take a 3 strike policy. Your number one customer blows it, and you have to call and go, hey, strike one, you're in violation of our policy. And our policy states that if we catch you again, strike two is going to be X amount of days on the do not sell list. And then strike three is indefinite on the do not sell list. So now they know. And you've had a chance to give them that warning. You know, mistakes happen. We get that. But look, you have to be firm about it. And so strike one's the warning, strike two is X amount of days on a do not sell list, and then strike three is indefinite. Until they can prove that they really can follow a policy and can be reinstated, just leave it indefinite. Some people will do that, and it works for them. Another one that has been used is basically all ad funds are cut. So whatever the advertising allowance is, or whatever co-op money you're giving them, that gets pulled. You think about it like this. If you're giving X amount for advertising for your product, they're going to advertise your product, and you pull that from them, well, they still have to advertise it. And if that's going to come out of their pocket, they're going to think twice about breaking your policy. So it's just another way that manufacturers have used. And again, I think a lot of the bigs will use it because it could be a lot of money involved. So it could really be an effective way to do it. Specific SKU blocked from a reseller. Look, an SKU being blocked, it can be done. This penalty basically blocks the reseller from being able to purchase only the specific SKU that they violated on. It leaves the balance of your products available. This works well for some manufacturers, but want to keep in mind, if you have a lot of SKUs that are offered, keeping track of them one by one by violation could be really difficult to manage. But I have seen some companies that have ERP systems and they can track all of that. Hey, great. You may not have a lot of SKUs. Maybe you're just building a few parts and selling a few parts that the racing world's buying, and those are the parts that you are selling, and you don't need to do that. It might be real easy to limit a part. Another one is warranty. What warranty? Many manufacturers will put on their websites that if you purchase their product from an unauthorized reseller or third-party marketplace, depending on what that is, there is no warranty. And some will say, well, that seems unfair. I mean, how do we do that to the consumer? Look, today's consumer is very savvy. They know what's going on. Okay. They know that when they buy something, like, which one of us would buy something from a website for a really low price if there was no phone number and no way to contact those people at that website? That would be absolutely crazy. Okay. So today's consumer knows what's going on. They're going to want to buy from somebody that they trust, that they know if there's an issue, they'll help them. And if there's technical, they need more support, they can get that from them. Those are the kinds of things that are important to today's consumers, not just price. So that's really, really important. But again, just to reiterate, whatever you choose for the sting, just be careful not to cripple your company in the process, but do make the reseller know that you mean business. You might not think that several months on the DNS list would be effective for a strike two offense, but could your company weather that kind of sales in a drought? No, it would be devastating to your company. So I'm just saying, be careful as you lay out the penalties. Look, nobody knows your customer base and sales channels like you. you know it will be effective and you know it won't. You know what happens when you can't fulfill a part for somebody, or you go on back order. You can already kind of tell what things, how that affects the flow in the sales channel. So you'll be able to develop, I believe, the right penalties for you. And again, a brand protection attorney can even list a lot of those because they have a ton of experience in what works and what doesn't work. So that's all, I think, really good stuff. Let's now move into, get quicker here, the 4 C's. So if you're going to utilize a pricing policy to protect your brand, you need to keep in mind a critical piece to the success of brand protection. It's called the 4 C's, and they are confidence. Customers and resellers must feel confident that the manufacturer will enforce the pricing policy, and the manufacturer needs to feel confident that their customers and resellers can follow the policy. So keep that in mind. When you're setting a policy and you're creating these rules, make it attainable. Don't, just like a sales goal, you would never set a sales goal you couldn't achieve, but you wouldn't sandbag it either. You wouldn't make it so easy you just hit it, right? You want to develop the company and grow the company, but definitely make it something that is that you can follow. So confidence is number one. Number two is commitment. Do they want to do it? Are they consistent? Do they just want to sell whatever they can and not manage it? Anybody can sell on price. You and I know this to be true. But if a reseller doesn't care, chances are they never will. I mean, I hate to say it, but they just shouldn't be an authorized seller of your product. And because it's just you and me talking right now, somebody else listening, I'm going to let you in a little secret. Contrary to popular belief, you do not need to sell everybody. It's an impossible feat, and you wouldn't want to do it anyway. So keep that in mind. There are people that will never care about your brand, your quality, everything that you bring to the table. They just want to make a buck, and limit it at that. So that's all I'm saying. Just be committed. Not only should they be committed, but you be committed to having the policy. Like I said earlier, don't say you have a policy and don't have one. Don't say you're going to do this and not do it. There's an old saying that says, who would build a house without first counting the cost to build the house, right? So you need to think about this. Are you going to be willing to do this? Okay. Very important. Controls. Controls is something that a few years ago, it was definitely a big deal. It was a lot harder, I think, in the earlier days when I was doing this. Today, customers, distributors, they have the controls in place to follow the policy. And that's what I'm talking about. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you've got a DNS list, do they have the ability to block a certain customer from buying your brand of the parts that you've called out? You're gonna have to be able to do that. They're gonna have to be able to do that. And so not only does the distributor have to be able to follow that, but then resellers have to have the controls in place. For example, website coupon for everything off, blah, blah, blah. Well, no. How many times have we seen on a website, 30% off, offer excludes Sony, Bose, Apple, whatever. There's ways that they can put the controls in place, and they can't tell you, I didn't know, I couldn't do that. No. Like, in today's world, they need to have the controls in place. And if they have the controls in place, they're going to be able to follow the policy. And once again, they're going to be able to be successful, and so will you. Conduct. How do they do business? I mean, are they honest about compliance, or are they always looking for a way to get around the system? I know you know these kind of customers. I've dealt with them for years. But listen, if they have the right conduct and they're sincere, they're really trying to have a business and a business plan, they're going to follow it. If these 4 criteria can be met, the chances of your pricing policy being a success, highly probable. You probably will have no issue. All right, well, let's go to the takeaways. So by way of review, the resources you've invested in your company to bring it where it is today is truly extraordinary. I've already talked about that. And while it is the right of resellers to sell at any price they want to, totally get that, it is your right not to let your company be devalued in the eyes of consumers. So I'm reading them your rights. Here you go. It's your right. Therefore, you have a say in who is and who is not an authorized reseller of your product or brand. That's really important to keep in mind. This is your brand. This is your brand protection. Okay? You may very well need to adopt a pricing policy to protect your brand from major price erosion in the marketplace. I get that. But if you're going to do this, again, you must commit. You must execute your policy no matter who the reseller is. You can't look the other way for this person or that person. You must treat everyone the same. The word unilateral, una, coming from one, laterally to everybody else, okay? So there are no favorites, and it's really simple. You know, it's amazing how sometimes people get all caught up and upset about it. It's nothing personal. It's nothing punitive. It's like it's yes or no. Are you compliant or are you not compliant? Well, he's over there doing, I'll deal with him over there, okay? We're talking about you. I don't discuss them with you, and I'm not discussing you with them. I'm handling my policy and I'm executing it evenly and fairly to everybody. That's the message. And does this all clean up overnight? Of course not. It's going to take a period of time. Imagine somebody breaking your policy, a major distributor, and they put product into a major third-party marketplace, a lot of product. It could take months or a year to flush out all that product just because they blew it once on selling somebody on a do not sell list. I know I've bought product before and seen where it came from. You know, I know exactly how that works. So that's really critical, you know, and people forget that. So if you can't be serious about having a policy and enforce it, just stop now. Just click off. Bye-bye. See ya. Have a good day. It's the worst thing you can do to you and your company's reputation. Ever been to the doctor and the doctor says, oh man, this procedure, this is going to really hurt. And it does. But you're grateful because the doctor told you up front, this is going to really hurt. You know, they didn't sugarcoat it. Well, I'm doing the same thing with you. No pain, no gain. It sounds cliche, and it is cliche, but it's true. This is going to be hard. But if you stay the course and you follow through and you get everything done, you know what happens? You become the brand that they want to sell. You become the company they want to align themselves with because they know that you've got their back and they got yours. Because look, they want to build their companies too, you know, but if you don't mean it, they're not going to support it either. And I think that that is ultimately the biggest message. You know, the goal is to protect your brand from being devalued in the eyes of consumers, and maybe even at wholesale. That's up to you. But you want your customers to be able to make the margins necessary for them to provide the kind of level of service that their customers have come to expect. You guys are giving stuff away on the internet. You can't hire quality people. You know how hard it is to get a good person in the first place. So by protecting your brand, you'll be the one that they want to sell. What do people sell first? What they have in stock, what they're making the most margin on. And obviously quality's in there, but you have a quality product, you know that. Listen, thank you for joining me today. These 5 tips were designed to educate and make you think about the possible strategies that will add value to your brand and to your distribution channels and to your distributors. As you learn more, you'll be able to determine if a pricing policy is right for you. Thanks again.